God, just you inserted banter in that top line, Martha. Any time to think about the banter.
Oh, sorry. I've sprung the banter upon you.
Hello and welcome to USA 2024 On the Road. I'm James Matthews in Philadelphia.
And I'm Martha Kelner in Washington, D.C.
We were almost in the same place for once, but I was on the road early this morning to Philadelphia for this Elon Musk court case. The local DA is trying to stop his $1 million election giveaway, which he says is illegal. As I'm sitting in this car in a Philadelphia car park, we've not seen Elon Musk. We did hear from John Summers, the lawyer for the DA, at the end of the morning's hearing.
DA Krasner was here to testify. Elon Musk didn't show.
The lawyer for Elon Musk said it's difficult for him to be somewhere with 12 hours' notice. Then the opposition in court said, well, we're talking about a wealthy individual here. He owns SpaceX. And then the judge interrupted. He said, he's hardly going to take a rocket ship and land on the building. Let's be serious. All fun and games as we get to the closing days of this most consequential election, Martha.
By the time people are listening to this, it will be less than 100 hours until the election. This really is crunch time, and all the celebrities are on the trail.
I'm not here as a celebrity. I'm not here as a politician. I'm here as a mother.
Kamala Harris has been enlisting Michelle Obama, Beyonce, Bruce Springsteen.
She's running to be the 47th president of the United States. Donald Trump is running to be an American tyrant.
Donald Trump appearing on the Joe Rogan podcast for 3 hours, no less.
Yeah, you're reading about him a little bit today. A guy like Kelly, who is a bully.
I'm not sure who made it to the end of that.
Well, that was just a lead up to both campaigns' final events. They went supersized. Harris at the Ellipse in Washington, D.C., Donald Trump at Maddison Square Garden in New York.
Yeah, exactly. I was with Harris in DC, and we'll speak about that a little bit later. But you were at Maddison Square Garden for that Donald Trump rally.
That's right, Martha. Yeah, we took the morning train up to New York Sunday morning, 8 a.m. from Union Station in DC.
Look at the platform has arrows pointing to the morning.
There were three of us, and on the train we sat in a four-seater, with a table arrangement. We were chatting to each other about the event and wondering aloud whether there would be a surprise lined up. Then the guy who'd already been sat by the window, we'd said hello to him. He piped up and he said, no, there won't be any surprise.
I was Director of Strategic Communications on the Trump-Pence 2020 campaign, Special Assistant to President Trump in the White House.
Mark Lauter, a former Trump aide, he was the man sitting beside us, and he was on the way to the Madison Square Garden too.
I think it's an effort to get out the vote to help make sure we keep those House seats in New York. I also think, too, there's probably a certain amount of play in winning the national popular vote.
We wanted to get a sense from him why Republicans are looking at the polling now and why they're confident about it. This is what he had to say.
So if you look at 2020, it came down to 43,000 votes in 3 states. 2016 came down to 80-some thousand votes in 3 different states. So razor-thin margins in both of those elections. And when I look and see the numbers today, I see that Donald Trump is up about 10% with the black vote. He's up 10% with the Hispanic vote. He's up about 10 or so points with the union vote, doubled his support with young voters. And so when you look at those kinds of massive shifts in 2 elections that were razor thin, that's hard to overcome. And then when you add on top of that Kamala Harris is currently 8 points back of where Joe Biden was in 2020 at this point. She's 5 to 6 points back in all the battleground states of where Joe Biden was at this point. The numbers just don't add up for Kamala Harris.
That's Mark Lauter. We'll hear more from him in a bit, but we duly arrived at West 31st Street outside Madison Square Garden, busy streets of New York. Everybody's got something to say to somebody.
That's the way she looking like. Yeah, I see y'all.
Oh, that's in their curriculum.
Trump rally right this way.
Yeah.
Trump rally. There we go. Right this way.
Some of the 20,000 crowd making their way inside Madison Square Garden. It is an iconic venue, hosts huge events. The New York Knicks play there. John Lennon played his last gig there, and 2 of the 3 Ali Fraser fights took place inside the garden. What it also hosted, though, infamously, was a Nazi rally in 1939. Donald Trump's opponents were quick to draw a parallel between that and this one. Hillary Clinton called this a modern day reenactment. And remember, we talked a few episodes back about Trump also being called a fascist by people who worked closely with him.
Can you let me answer the question?
That's the sound of Rudy Giuliani, former mayor of New York and former personal lawyer, of course, to Donald Trump, shouting at me, "Let me answer the question." What happened was we asked him a question. His security pushed us away, and that was Rudy shouting at us to come back. So we went back towards his vehicle, and this is the exchange we had.
Bill Clinton was nominated here much closer in time to the Hitler rally. So Hillary, stuff it up your lying face.
Bill Clinton wasn't described as a fascist by close aides.
Bill Clinton was described as a man who raped women, had many children in...
Before we take you inside the Madison Square Garden, let's hear from Congressman Byron Donalds. He's a Republican, Trump supporter. And you'll know this, Martha, a lot of politicians, they strive in an interview for that dismissive chastisement when you ask them a question. Well, listen to this guy. He's a world champion at it.
I mean, if you're going to try to tie everything to something what happened, 90 years ago? That's what you're doing? Man, get out. Bye.
Opponents
that's not even a question, and you know that.
Well, opponents are drawing a parallel, and Donald Trump is a man who's been described as a fascist.
That's because opponents are dumb and they're losing, so now they're trying to do anything to get a rise out of voters, man. Stop that. Be better.
Of all
the venues. Be
better
than that. Ask better questions.
Of all the venues. Anywhere in the world for any country. Kamala has imported criminal migrants from prisons and jails, insane asylums and mental institutions from all around the world, from Venezuela to the Congo. A lot of people are coming from the Congo prisons. They're coming from all over the world, and she has resettled them into your communities to prey upon innocent American citizens. But the day I take the oath of office, the migrant invasion of our country ends and the restoration of our country begins.
Well, that was Donald Trump, the headline act, of course, but only on stage after more than 6 hours and something like 25 speakers. This was a marathon event. There was a tone and content that was at times racist, misogynistic, and divisive.
You know, there's a lot going on. Like, I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico.
That supposed joke was by a comedian called Tony Hinchcliffe. That provoked a big reaction among Trump's opponents. Even though many of these people were comedians, they'll never get near office or any Trump administration. They contributed to a tone and a content that for many would have been ugly and threatening. But that Puerto Rican gag in particular, so-called gag, that was the headline grabber. Now, if you take the D train to the South Bronx, it gets you to the Yankee Stadium, home of the New York Yankees. That's a baseball fan being interviewed. There's a big Puerto Rican and Latino community around that Yankee Stadium. So outside the Yankee Stadium, we asked members of the Latino community their view on what had taken place at Madison Square Garden and some of the things that were said.
Well, I think those comments are very, very racist because I live in Puerto Rico and we are U.S. citizens. I'm as American as him. I think that will affect Donald Trump's campaign because the Latin voters won't vote for Trump because they think they're going to be excluded of their platforms and everything important.
I thought it was funny. I'm just gonna say that. I think most Latinos have a sense of humor. We're not easily offended people. Most of the time people are offended on our behalf. As far as what Latino voters feel, I'm not a politician, that's not my thing, but I think it might sway some people, but overall, at least the ones I know, they thought it was funny.
There you go. That wasn't a scientific study by any means, but it's clear from that straw poll that some cared more than others, and I suppose that's going to be the case come election day. The Trump campaign has distanced itself from the Puerto Rican material and some of the worst of what was said on stage. But, you know, for Trump's opponents, the content, the tone, it fits into their narrative that he and his party, the party he's molded, would run a government for some of the people to the exclusion of others.
And you would think that someone from his campaign might have cast an eye over what this comedian was going to say. And it seems like someone did, because I know he was planning on referring to Kamala Harris as the C word, and that was cut out because they thought that would be beyond the pale for Trump supporters. So I'm not sure quite how believable it is that no one had any idea that this comedian was going to make this joke, in inverted commas, about the Puerto Rican community. Do you think, though, and I guess this is the key question, could those comments actually affect the way Puerto Rican people behave at the ballot box? And in turn, could it affect the result of this election?
I have to say, I don't detect any great anxiety from Team Trump. They point to the polls as evidence that they're scoring on the big issues. They think that criticism of Donald Trump's rhetoric is a kind of white noise that his support base has stopped listening to. They aggressively are targeting the young male vote. And that kind of language we heard, the tone, the content, as bad as it is for much of the audience, Trump's team think it registered with those young males, a demographic that isn't necessarily locked in, and where there is room for movement at this late stage. They think that will be a key. Right, let's take a quick break, and when we're back, Martha, you're going to take us to Kamala Harris's final big event of the campaign. Welcome back to USA 2024 on the road. We've been talking closing arguments today, the last big push from both campaigns. Martha, you've been covering Kamala Harris's final stand a bit closer to home in Washington, D.C. She put on a show and you put on the trainers, is that right?
Yeah, always sensible footwear for these sort of events. We ended up walking a couple of miles in the end to go see her at the Ellipse in Washington, D.C. Huge amount of security around this event, as you might imagine, given what we've seen in rallies this campaign.
Yeah, nothing like D.C. on lockdown to keep the steps up.
No, my Uber driver, who we used for the first bit of the journey, was furious at the constant road closures that he says he's had over the last couple of months. But yeah, they chose to stage her closing argument at the very spot that Donald Trump addressed his legion of supporters before that storming of the Capitol on January the 6th. A very symbolic move, not only a reminder of what Trump did almost 4 years ago, but also an attempt by the Harris campaign to cast her as the stronger, possibly even the safer candidate. This idea that she brings cohesion, whereas he brings chaos. Just come through the security cordon at the Ellipse, ready for Kamala Harris's closing speech. It's still around 3 hours before she's due to take the stage, but the crowd is building here. They're expecting maybe 40,000 people. Lots of women, lots of young women as well, some of them wearing those camouflage Harris Walls 2024 hats. Lots of people singing, dancing, waving stars and stripes flags. It is good vibes, as they say. And not only did Kamala Harris use Donald Trump's Ellipse venue, the venue that he became infamous for using on January the 6th, we also saw the crowd doing the YMCA, making fun of Trump in a way because he uses that YMCA song famously in his rallies.
Did you do the YMCA on the Ellipse?
I did not do the YMCA.
Disappointing.
I know, sorry about that. I might have done a little bop when Freedom came on. I have to say, I've got that song on loop now in my head. I've heard it so many times. But yeah, I think the vibe was certainly positive. And the crowd size, too, a source of enthusiasm for Harris. Originally, the permit for this rally was 7,500 people. That was then increased to 20,000, then 40,000. The Harris campaign are claiming 75,000 people were there. We can't verify that figure, but certainly there were a lot of people.
Yeah, a bigger crowd than Madison Square Garden. That can only hold 19,500. Size matters, of course, when it comes to crowds in this election campaign.
Yeah, and both campaigns are always very keen to state exactly how many people they've had at their campaigns. I have to say, I registered not only to go in as press for the Harris event, but also as a punter, because sometimes we're not sure if we're going to get accreditation to get inside. And I was amazed because the morning of the Harris event, I got a phone call, random unknown number, and it was a volunteer working for the Harris campaign who was checking if I was still planning on attending, checking if I was okay getting there, if I needed any help with transport, and then checking if I was going to vote as well. So they are both campaigns incredibly keen to ensure that every single person they can possibly get to those rallies is there.
But of course, control only goes so far when it comes to a rally the size of the one you were at.
Yeah, you can't control everyone who is in the crowd. And in fact, she'd just begun to speak and there was this huge siren that went off somewhere in the crowd, and it turns out they were Gaza anti-war protesters. And I think it really highlights one of the key vulnerabilities of the Harris campaign, and that is her loyalty to President Biden on most, if not all, of his policies, including the US's support of Israel's military campaign in Gaza.
Did she bring that up in her speech?
To be honest, I'm not sure she was even aware of those protests taking place. She was focused more on making her case in her terms to be president, painting herself as a unifier and Donald Trump as a divider.
And the fact that someone disagrees with us does not make them the enemy within. That's right. They are family, neighbors, classmates, co-workers. They are fellow Americans. And as Americans, we rise and fall together. America, for too long, we have been consumed with too much division, chaos, and mutual distrust. And it can be easy then to forget a simple truth. It doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way.
That's interesting because Donald Trump paints Kamala Harris as more of a warmonger, saying that she would bring back the draft, that he is the anti-war peace candidate.
Yeah, and I think that rhetoric from Trump is his way of trying to prey on her vulnerability with the war in Gaza. We've seen in our own reporting, our colleague Mark Stone has been up in Michigan, that Harris is losing a significant number of Arab Americans. And as I mentioned, you know, the protesters continue to follow her around the country. And there's no way to get around the fact that Israel's invasion of Gaza and the war in Ukraine all did happen under the Biden-Harris administration, and that plays into Donald Trump's hand.
But the spectre of Puerto Rico was never far away. As Harris was speaking outside the White House, where you were, Martha, inside, Joe Biden was giving an interview, and of course, you know, cue another gaffe.
Just the other day, a speaker at his rally called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage. Well, let me tell you something. I don't know the Puerto Rican that I know, or Puerto Rico, where I'm in my home state of Delaware. They're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters.
Yeah, I'm sure the Harris campaign would have wished that President Biden had stayed out of this one because it was about the most unhelpful interjection that you can possibly imagine.
Yeah, these gaffes are exactly what forced Biden off the ticket in the first place. I suppose now it could be Harris paying for his mistakes. She's been trying to do more to distance herself from Biden. After that remark, she said she strongly disagreed with any criticism of people based on who they are voting for.
Yeah, she spent the next day cleaning up President Biden's mess. And I think that's one of the difficulties that she's having this campaign, is trying to own some of the perceived successes of the Biden-Harris administration while trying to distance herself from some of the perceived failures of the Biden administration. And that is an incredibly difficult tightrope to walk.
And you weren't just on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., Martha. You went to Kamala Harris's alma mater, Howard University.
Yeah, I guess it's probably around a 10, 15-minute drive, give or take, from the White House to Howard University, which is where Kamala Harris went to university. And it's this gorgeous campus, you know, big gleaming gates, huge white buildings. And in the middle of the lecture halls and dormitories is this area which the students know as the quad. It's gorgeous in autumn with these, big trees and students sitting around on red Adirondack chairs, some of them on their laptops, some of them, FaceTiming, reading books. And I asked them, first of all, what they thought of the campaign so far. And as you might imagine, a large number of them were going to vote for Harris or already had cast their vote for Harris.
Oh, okay.
British Sky News?
Yeah, I know Sky News. Yeah, I watch the Premier League. So, I know.
Joshua, I'm Martha. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you,
Yeah. How do you think the campaign's going?
I think the campaign is going really well. I've been watching a lot of the, media on everything that both sides are saying, and I feel like right now it's very divisive, but there's a lot of hope, especially here on this campus for, one of our alumni, and we're all very excited to see her win.
Did you see the comments that President Biden made last night about Trump supporters being garbage?
I definitely did, and like I said before, it seems like this campaign, even more so than previous ones, have just been very divisive.
Will those sort of comments from President Biden affect the election at all, do you think? Will they lose her votes?
I don't think so. I think by now, everybody knows whose side they're on.
I'm from the Turks and Caicos Islands. I'm a first-generation American.
Okay.
So, this is actually going to be my first election voting as well. So I'm ready to cast my ballot for Kamala Harris.
What an election to be voting in.
Most consequential one I've seen in a long time. So,
yeah. What's your reading on it? Obviously, the polls are incredibly close at the moment.
I'm really hoping that Kamala Harris can win outside of being a Howard University student. Her policies are ones that I think are really going to help Americans, the average American, really and truly.
I'm from Louisiana, and I flew home to vote, so I already voted.
Do you think she can do it?
I think she can do it. I feel like anything is possible, and for the sake of future generations, I hope she does do it.
I think I'd gone there expecting her to have pretty steadfast, if not universal support. This is not only her alma mater, it's, a centre of black excellence, one of the historically black colleges of America. And so it struck me that quite a few of the students I spoke to were either unsure who they were going to vote for or were not going to vote at all.
Wins. I'm not going to lie. May the
Really?
best man win. Yeah.
Wow.
Because who the president of the United States is really very much a popularity contest. That's what Trump does. I don't see him as a politician. I see him as an entertainer.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Are you not concerned about some of the policies that he may introduce and the division that he stirs? And
Well, both of them support Israel. It's like people that are voting for Kamala are really on the standpoint of, I'm voting for the lesser of two evils, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Will you vote for her, or might you not vote for her because of
I'm not voting for Trump. That's what I know for certain.
I think she could be a little bit more firm in what she stands on, because of some of the wishy-washiness and saying, we want people to come in and then we don't. So I think if she just stands on her square and really is confident in what she believes in and has the data and the statistics to back it up, then people will be able to follow her more, because it's not like she's trying to, pander for votes or trying to just appease. That's the word I'm looking for, appeasement.
I still have to make my mind up on between Kamala and third party. I definitely won't be voting for Trump.
What can she do in the next 6 days to win you over?
I was actually planning on filling out my absentee ballot today. I just need a witness. But once I get around to doing that, I'll have my decision made. But
I remember watching the presidential debate and being disappointed that these are my two options, because neither fully align with what I believe and what I want to see for my future, the future of my generation. But I think reproductive freedom, that alone, in this country is already in a dangerous enough position where I don't want to be careless with it, and voting for someone who is also willing to prioritize my health and my reproductive freedom and the health of women in the United States, that's really important to me. So that alone kind of gives me not all of the reason why I'm voting for her, but almost enough, I guess.
One woman there saying that reproductive rights alone is enough of an issue to persuade her to vote for Kamala Harris. And that's something that the Trump campaign is very aware of. At a rally on Wednesday, Donald Trump said he was going to protect women, in his words, whether they like it or not.
I said, well, I'm going to do it whether the women like it or not. I'm going to protect them. I'm going to protect them from migrants coming in. I'm going to protect them from foreign countries that want to...
An odd and slightly menacing way to phrase that. And the Harris campaign almost immediately hit back, saying those comments were very offensive to women and showed that he doesn't understand female agency. And one of the interesting themes that's popping up this week is the gender gap in early voting. There's some very interesting reporting by the news website Politico that apparently shows that across battleground states, there's a 10-point gender gap in early voting so far. So women accounting for roughly 55% of the early vote, while men are around 45%. Of course, we can't say definitively that the women are all voting for Harris, but that's certainly encouraging for the Democratic Party.
What do you think it is about Kamala Harris that's not landing with those voters, who don't support her?
I think something I keep hearing time and again is that people don't quite understand who Kamala Harris is or what she stands for. But in fact, I think for most of those students who I spoke for, it was an ambivalence to the whole political system, really. They just viewed Harris as yet another cynical politician who had abandoned her principles in search of power. And I think that's why we see them deploying celebrities so much in the final week of this campaign to try and increase the excitement around a candidate. Interestingly, the Democratic Party traditionally does better at turning out their voters. So I think certainly for Harris, I think getting young voters to the ballot box is going to be key.
Before we finish, just wanted to take you back to that New York train on the way to Madison Square Garden. You remember Mark Lauter, Donald Trump's former aide. I asked him to tell us a story from his days with the Donald.
But if you've ever been on Air Force One, they have these beautiful leather-bound menu holders with the logo of Air Force One, and you open it up, and you see what is being served for dinner tonight on the plane. And so the president comes in, starts chatting with us. He looks down at the menu, and it was some sort of a strawberry summer salad of some sort. And he looks down at the menu, and he looks up at Corey David and I. He looks back down at the menu, looks back up at Corey David and I. He's like, these guys don't want that. They want cheeseburgers and fries. They're the best cheeseburgers and fries on Air Force One. They're amazing. You guys want cheeseburgers and fries, don't you? And we're like, yes, sir, we want cheeseburgers and fries. So they bring out the president, cheeseburgers and fries, Corey, cheeseburgers and fries, David, cheeseburgers and fries, and brought me the salad. And they were all looking at me, and I'm like, I ordered the cheeseburger and fries, but I got the salad. And then, of course, I joked, I think, with the steward, well, did my wife get to you, to tell you that I have to have the salad and not the cheeseburgers and fries?
There you go. Saladgate. Mark Lauter's tale from the front with Donald Trump. Which begs the question, Martha, what's your most told story from covering America? If I said to you, tell me one story, what would it be?
Well, I'm not sure it's one that necessarily shows my dogged journalism, but certainly the one that impresses my friends back home the most is the day that I went to Paris Hilton's house in Beverly Hills. And it is exactly as you might expect. There are pictures, portraits of Paris Hilton everywhere. I'm sure it's similar in your house, James.
Careful.
Even the cushion covers had Paris Hilton's face on. There was a giant stuffed llama at the front door. Paris Hilton's mum was having a party downstairs. Kris Jenner was there, the Kardashians' mum. Basically the entire cast of The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. And next to the door, as we went in, was lines and lines of goodie bags, and inside them they have these candles, which I later Googled, and they're worth sort of $300. I didn't nick one, but yeah, just the excess in there was everything that you would expect.
Very good. Well, for my humble offering, I'm going to take you on a journey from Paris Hilton to Boris Johnson. We wanted to speak to him. It was to do with COVID. He wasn't answering our calls, wasn't taking questions. He was in Las Vegas. He was going on a speaking engagement in one of the big casino hotels there. So we flew out. Early in the morning, we got up to see if we could find him. Our producer, Sarah, she spotted him by the swimming pool. But this place was so big, myself and the cameraman, it took us 15 minutes to get to the swimming pool, by which time, of course, the bold Boris had disappeared. And that was the last we saw of him that day. So after 2 days in his pursuit in Vegas, we flew back to Washington, D.C., kind of tail between our legs. And on the Friday morning, by way of, I don't know, cheering myself up, my wife and I, we went to a place called Kramer's, famous bookstore in DuPont in Washington, D.C. We went through the bookshop at the front to the restaurant in the back. And then around midday, I got a call from the news desk saying, we think Boris Johnson's actually in Washington, D.C. So we went to Dulles Airport, hung around, and of course, Boris Julie turned up. We asked him a few questions, and that was our job done. On the way back into the city, I looked on social media and I saw a picture of Boris Johnson in a bookshop. While I was in the back of Kramer's having a spot of lunch, where do you think Boris Johnson was? He was in the front of Kramer's having a look through the bookshelves. Having chased him in Vegas for 2 days, he lands right on our doorstep. So there you go. Boris Johnson, Paris Hilton. That's journalism, I suppose. But anyway, that's it for today. We'll be back tomorrow, no doubt, with more shameless name dropping, certainly more tales from the final stretch towards the US election. Hope you can join us then.